crypto holders, is the top in and is it time to sell? Well, I wanted to go over exactly that today because we've got a whole bunch of different charts to show you about all of the things that could indicate that maybe it is the top and all the things that indicate that it maybe isn't. And honestly, the kind of the accumulation of data does seem to indicate that it's probably not. But again, we always have to have an open mind, and we need to understand exactly what we're looking at to make sure that we don't kind of really laser in on one piece of data and that is the piece of data that happens to be wrong this cycle. So without further ado, we got a whole bunch to get through today, so I did want to jump right on into taking a look at the charts. First off, we're just going to start with the basics. We're going to be looking here at Bitcoin price. Now I want to show a couple of different things here. So first off, we can see right now, at least as of the time of this recording, we are seeing a little bit of a pullback after we saw a push to new all-time highs. Now you can see it does look like we may have seen a little bit of a double top here, so there is the possibility that we run into a little bit longer or of a more prolonged pullback. That is always a possibility. You could see when this did happen in December and January, we did go back into a kind of a months long pullback, and then we saw again a kind of another really nice run up to all-time highs, and then potentially seeing something similar happening again. The other thing from kind of a more macro level that could indicate that this was the top is if we look back at 2021, we see that actually something fairly similar happened. We move up, we see here we almost kind of saw like a triple top, but we see kind of that double top with the second high being just a little bit higher, and then we see a pretty aggressive move back to the downside, and then we see another bounce coming all the way back up to again another all-time high, followed then again by another all-time high, and then we see things like the wheels really come off, right? And that's where we go into this multi-year long bear market. We saw prices dipping down up into like the the mid-teens, and then of course we see kind of this turnaround, and you can see potentially structure looking somewhat similar. Obviously the volatility is quite a bit different here, but the structure looking somewhat similar. So this potentially indicating that we may have kind of seen the top for this cycle with Bitcoin. Again, it's almost impossible to know. The other kind of key difference here is when we do see these tops, this most recent top was not actually overextended on price. This first one was, but the second one was not. And when we look back in 2021, we could see overextended here, not here, but definitely overextended on this one, and then maybe not a little bit on this one. So we could see kind of some bearish divergence going on in both directions, which again could potentially indicate that we are potentially going to be seeing a further move down. However, we are seeing some other charts going on where the crypto total market cap has of course broken all-time highs, led largely by Bitcoin. But if we look at the total 2 market cap, which is essentially everything not called Bitcoin, you will see that if we go all the way back to 2021, we have actually not even broken all-time highs from what we saw out of the total 2 market cap in 2021. So we, even after all of this time, even after all of the pumps that we've seen, all of the craziness, all of the the election frenzy, all of this type of stuff, we still have not seen altcoins reach above what they saw in 2021. Now, of course, maybe this is just a little bit of a different cycle. This is a little bit more of a risk off cycle, so Bitcoin still benefited same as it normally does. But since this is a bit more of a risk off cycle, we haven't seen that same jump out of altcoins. And that is always, of course, a possibility, and it's something that we should think about. But you could see here, we haven't necessarily seen that same level of pump. We also can see here from the Bitcoin price chart, when we look back at like 2017, getting way up into like the maximum bubble territory. When we back in 2013, above maximum bubble territory. Same thing again here back in 2013 again. Same thing back here again in 2011. Now, if we look back in 2021, when we saw Bitcoin top out, we got into kind of like the FOMO intensifies, or the is this a bubble range is kind of where it appears we were at. If we look right now and we see the tops that we've been at, I don't think we've ever really gotten out of like the accumulate, or maybe we got into the still cheap range here. Potentially, if we did, we just barely wicked into it. But mostly we've been kind of on the bottom end of this kind of this Bitcoin rainbow price chart. So again, maybe there is the possibility that this price chart no longer holds, and maybe it's something where, we don't actually see it reach the highs that it potentially could, which does seem potentially possible because again, maximum bubble territory, we're looking at like $850,000 for a Bitcoin. And again, that would be like as of a week ago. So very, very large kind of variance in price there that we would need to see some ridiculous kind of accumulation moving into Bitcoin. But so maybe this, this chart no longer holds. Okay, well, we have some others as well. We have Bitcoin Google Trends. If we look back in 2017, of course, this was kind of the first time people were discovering it. Lots of people were wondering about Bitcoin, and this is kind of the all-time high that we have seen for Bitcoin as it relates to Google Trends. The next, we can see a similar peaks and kind of the peaks and troughs coming here back in 2021 for Bitcoin. And we have seen a similar peak coming back on in 2024, but at least as of recently, we have not actually seen anything kind of rivaling what we saw back in 2024. And we also have not seen kind of the same highs that we saw. Even if we were to kind of map these to kind of lower highs, we probably still haven't quite seen what we could potentially define as a top. Now, the other really key indicator that I wanted to discuss today is an indicator that this is actually one of the only indicators that we have seen in crypto that actually predicted the top of the next upcoming cycle. This is only one of the ones that is actually kind of future predicted a top. A lot of them, people will kind of try and find data. They'll fit it on the data and be like, oh, this is like a thing that we've noticed. It probably works. And then it really doesn't ever again in the future. But this is one of the only ones that actually did work, in predicting the top here. And we can see it has every single time predicted the top is essentially when the 111-day moving average essentially crosses over the 350-day moving average times 2. That has generally been kind of the top of the market. You could see here crossing over in 2011, 2013 once, 2013, or I guess 2014 technically at this point. And then we could see here crossing over again in 2017, and then again here in 2021. As you can tell, if we zoom in on this just a little bit, we are not even close to seeing anything like that happening here on the Bitcoin Pi cycle top. For us to hit the Bitcoin Pi cycle top, we would need to see the 111-day moving average be over 184,000, and right now it's about 108,000. So we would need to see some pretty aggressive moves in price back to the upside. Realistically, we'd probably need to be looking at like a 200,000, maybe even a 220-ish thousand dollar Bitcoin peak for us to actually hit this Pi cycle top. So again, I'm not saying that this is possible. I'm not guaranteeing that it's possible, but we would need to see a pretty strong move for something like that to happen. Now, moving along, the other thing I want to show you, again, we're kind of moving between what we've seen out of Bitcoin and what we've seen out of altcoins, potentially some of the price movement indicating that we could have seen a top on Bitcoin, again, just purely from price. Any of these other indicators that we're looking at, not really showing or seeming to indicate that, at least so far. Here you can also see, jumping back into altcoins, we can see the altcoin season index has not recently broken above. Of course, we did get a little bit of an alt season here back in kind of that December 2024 when we saw a little bit of that alt season rotation. But we haven't seen some of these elevated levels like we saw back in 2022, 2021, even back here a little bit in 2020, and way back in 2017 where it was just like constantly alt season all of the time. We really have only seen some tiny little crests up into alt season. We saw another one back in January of 2024. So haven't even been there recently. The most recent alt season indication that we've had was back in December of 2024. So still alts, potentially, like I said, maybe it's just a little bit of a risk off cycle, but alts definitely nowhere even close to indicating that we are, potentially near the top for crypto. Moving along, we can also see here in the crypto fear and greed index, this cycle, we've really only seen crypto fear and greed peaking into the extreme greed range twice. We could see here back in March of 2024, this was kind of the initial kickoff of meme coin mania. And then here and back in November and December of 2024, this of course was when XRP was going nuts. We had Trump getting elected, and of course there was some, there were people who felt fairly good that would have been a good thing for crypto. And so things started to get a little bit crazy there as well, before then kind of promptly falling off a bridge. So now we can see right now, we've not actually ever been back up into that extreme greed, other than essentially Inauguration Day in the US was kind of the last time we were in extreme greed. We've not been there since. So again, really not seeming to indicate that we are near a top here. But again, of course, anything can happen, and this is kind of conflating prices or price action that we've seen out of Bitcoin, as well as price action that we are seeing out of altcoins, Bitcoin, of course, most certainly doing better than altcoins and potentially throwing off a couple of indications that maybe we could have seen a top, but not anything super strong. And altcoins, like absolutely nothing is indicating that we could have seen a top here. Next, I want to take a look at the, actually this is the Fear and Greed Index again. We can see here the Bitcoin price temperature. This is the last thing that I wanted to end off on here. We can see Bitcoin price kind of peaking at about 9 in 2017, peaking about 7 here back in 2021. And here, so if we were to kind of follow this law of diminishing returns, which if you haven't realized, this seems to be kind of a common denominator through all of the information that we've looked at. If we do kind of follow this trend of diminishing returns, we would probably expect something to hit kind of in this 5 range. The highest we've gotten is about 3.5. So at least from like a Bitcoin price temperature perspective, we still have not actually seen anything look at least a little bit frothy. And so it's for all of these reasons, while of course, you know, there are a couple of things that are indicating we could have seen potential tops, there are so many other things that are indicating, at least in my opinion, that we have not actually seen the tops in this cycle, and the best may still be yet to come. And so, of course, you do need to make your own decisions, and you do need to, you kind of live with the decisions that you make with your own money, because it is your money and you are responsible for it. But at least for me right now, my plan is I am still looking to stay involved within the crypto market, stay invested, continue to increase or, hold my exposure to altcoins, and maybe potentially double down depending on what we see kind of coming over the next several weeks, because I do think that this could be kind of the last major dip that we see before we start to see a really strong move to the upside. Generally, again, for those of you who are new, if you've been around for a while, you probably already know this to a degree, but generally in the year after the Bitcoin halving, September is not a great month, and we are running into September, so I am basically expecting that this next month will not be particularly great, but generally Q4 in the year after Bitcoin has its halving, things are really, really good for altcoins. So I'm going to be watching very, very closely. Hopefully you will too. If you are and you're going to be looking to watch closely, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I do have all the buttons to do all the things just below the video here. If you did find the information in this video useful, of course, liking the video does help as well. And if you do choose to subscribe, you can also hit that notification bell so you are able to keep up to date with all of the things going on within the crypto market. Also, if you have any comments, questions, anything like that, just drop those in the comment section. I do try to read and respond to all of those. So if you have anything that you want me to see, that'd be a great way to do so. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.